Police officers have their work cut out for them. Sometimes their work can make them feel like they're living in a horror movie as they find themselves facing incredible and unbelievable cases. Officers often have to think fast to come up with a resolution or solution to an out-of-the-ordinary and unusual case. It could be anything from an absurd prank call to a hostage situation, and they must be prepared for any and all kinds of challenges. And even when the hardest cases have been solved, every police officer is familiar with the feeling that the most unbelievable stories probably haven't even been heard of yet. The police were completely stumped by how this old ship had suddenly shown up at a beach in the Bahamas. It had supposedly sunk in the Bermuda Triangle 90 years ago, but there is no sign it ever got underwater. Everything about this ship was a mystery to the cops, at least until they managed to make their way inside, because what they found below the deck made everything clear to them. The police were very careful when exploring the ship. They still had a hard time processing what they were seeing and wanted not to disturb anything as it could potentially be used as evidence. Any disturbance of the scene and its contents could easily ruin any chance of determination of what happened. If something is moved or tampered with, the chain of evidence and criminal investigation could be disturbed. The best thing was to just leave for now and wait for the detectives, but they were hearing sounds that simply had to be checked out. It is essential that such potential evidence remains untouched and untarnished for the police investigation to be able to process properly. If not, the accuracy of the investigation may be irrevocably compromised. It is essential that an exact contract of the scene is made when it is first discovered, and that the scene is left untouched in order to bring justice to those involved. Any disturbance could result in destruction of authentic and important evidence, as well as bring chaos to the analysis, which could distort the truth. As they were searching, they eventually managed to pin down the room where the noise was coming from. They had been very quiet themselves, so they assumed whatever was in there had no idea they were coming. They counted to 3 and kicked in the door with their weapons drawn. This is a critical time for police officers, and they must be careful. This is especially true when the possible suspect is armed and dangerous. In this case, however, they don't even know what they're up against. The officer's safety should always be the first priority. As such, officers should take the necessary steps to defend themselves first and foremost, including increasing situational awareness, using protective or defensive equipment, or carrying a sidearm. They should also be trained in non-lethal defensive tactics. Officers may also have to call for backup or further assistance if they do not feel comfortable engaging in the situation alone. The police have come across a wide variety of confounding occurrences, some dangerous and some downright strange. They've encountered exotic animals, hazardous materials, and seemingly impossible scenarios. In each case, they had to think on their feet and figure out a way to assess and resolve the situation. On a few occasions, the police have come across evidence that appears to defy science. In other cases, they've stumbled upon bizarre clues that point in an unexpected direction. Even the most strange and perplexing problems eventually have a solution. Regardless of what they're faced with, the police tend to find a way to make sense of the situation. But when the first officer saw what was inside the room, he nearly dropped his weapon out of pure shock. How is this even possible? But how had this old ship made its way to a Bahama beach? What did the police find inside, and how did it shock them so much? The first guests on the Bahama beach were still looking at the sea in complete disbelief. They had expected to see the same clear blue water that was there yesterday, but instead, they were now face to face with a giant ship that had seemingly appeared out of nowhere overnight. The size and condition of the vessel further astounded them, as if it had been at sea untouched for decades. Many of them had never seen something like this before, and its sudden presence left them in awe. The shipwreck was an eerie reminder of how quickly a seafaring vessel could be claimed by the sea, surprising and lifting startling memories of other tales of lost vessels coming ashore after many years out at sea. People on the beach were stunned by the sight. and they still continued to gape at the wreck, trying to come to terms with how such an enormous thing could have made it all the way to the shore. Rumors and stories began to circulate among the onlookers of similar ships that had made their way to the shore after years of being lost at sea. As more tourists started to flood the beach, news about the ship started to spread around the locals as well, until it eventually reached the ears of the city's police. They had a hard time believing the story at first, but a couple of pictures managed to convince them rather quickly. Some of the locals even speculated that the ship may have been carrying some sort of valuable cargo, fueling the rumor mill. This mysterious event quickly fired up people's imaginations and spurred curiosity as to what could have led to the ship's sudden appearance. Everyone had a theory, ranging from the plausible to the downright supernatural. But for now, the mystery remained unsolved. Rumors like this have a tendency to make people question the boundaries of what is possible and create a buzz of excitement across the town. Some began imagining the events leading up to the ship coming ashore, talking about the brave sailors and their story that was now concealed in the sand of the beach. Others speculated that the ship had been guided spiritually by gods or other supernatural forces that may have been protecting the ship from harm all this time. The presence of the abandoned vessel only served to emphasize how unforgiving the sea can be, and how luck and timing can sometimes be a key factor in a ship surviving its voyage. Many of the people on the shoreline wondered silently to themselves what they would have done in the same situation, and what choices the sailors had taken to protect everyone on board. Some of those present gave prayers or offerings of thanks to whatever force had guided them safe, no matter how much of a miracle they believed had occurred. As the day wore on, the crowd began to grow even more, as well as the talks about the ship and the tales of bravery from all of those who had ventured upon it. The sight of the ship was enough to stir curiosity in each of them, since none of them had ever seen anything like it before. They had no idea what kind of ship this was, where it came from, nor how it got here overnight. But they did know that the last thing they wanted was for a bunch of careless tourists to start making their way on the ship before experts could have a look. Who knows what they could disturb on there? They felt a mix of shock and awe as they stood on the beach, peering from a distance and speculating about its purpose or origin. It was as if this ship had sailed through the night for no reason other than to rouse their minds and creativity. The sense of mystery left them with so much to ponder, endlessly trying to fill in the blanks. For all they knew, it could have come from a distant, long-forgotten land, or been sent from the depths of the ocean itself. As they buzzed with wonder, some even believed it was a gift from the gods, or the last remains of a legend. But all of their speculation was just that, speculation, until real answers were discovered. And so the police started driving in the direction of the beach full throttle and with their sirens blaring. But they were quickly stopped in their tracks, as they were clearly not the only people heading to the beach today. Word had very much gotten around. The police quickly began strategizing the safest way to approach the crowd while still being able to conduct their investigation. All thoughts of conducting a preliminary investigation in the vicinity of the ship were pushed to the side in lieu of the more pressing matter of dispersing the crowd. With the help of the police's reinforcements, they began moving the crowd away from the ship, emphasizing the need for their own safety and stressing that the beach is not currently suitable for recreational activities. The police wanted to be able to work quickly and efficiently, but the curious onlookers were not moving as fast as the police would have wanted. It was keeping the police from being able to move closer to the ship and begin their examination. This was not one of the bigger, more popular beaches in the Bahamas, and so the road towards was not made for so much traffic. Everything was stuck, and there did not seem to be any movement coming anytime soon. The officers had to take a more drastic approach here, but it was not easy. People just wouldn't listen to them and stayed glued to the spot where the ship was located. Some were taking pictures, some were approaching the ship with caution, some were just chatting with each other in a way. Scenarios like this make it difficult for policemen to do their job efficiently, as they have to manage crowd control and at the same time take care of the safety of the people around them. The curious crowd did not seem to be leaving anytime soon, though, so the officers had to come up with creative ways to make sure the people stayed away from the beached ship. They made some calls and broadcasted on the news and their social media that people were ordered to leave the beach, and if people were present there, they could expect a heavy fine. They also commandeered the only police chopper on the island and sent 2 other officers with it toward the beach. All the while, they had no idea if the ship posed a threat or if it was an unfamiliar, lost passenger. The police took the measure of blocking the roads that ran to the beach and issuing a warning that anybody marching down that road would be arrested. To ensure everyone was safe, the police also issued a curfew, so people wouldn't stroll down to the beach as they please. Furthermore, patrols were sent along the beach to prevent people from entering it, and they even have a few tents set up in the area to disperse the crowd if they manage to get close. All these steps are taken to ensure the safety of the public, while the police attempt to get to the bottom of what this mysterious ship is all about. Even though they had sent out the warning that nobody was allowed on the beach, they did not expect anybody on the beach itself to even see it, let alone listen to it. The helicopter had to be quick, and when it arrived, the officers saw what their colleagues had feared most. The ship was completely surrounded by a huge crowd of people that had gathered to catch a glimpse of the floating marvel. Despite the police department's best attempts to maintain order and prevent people from mingling too close to the ship, they could not control the sheer force of the ocean of people gathered around the site. The officers had to think on their feet in order to keep the people at a safe distance and ensure that the secrecy of the ship was secured. They urged the public to stay back and formed a perimeter around the beach. They also reminded people to use their phones only to take pictures, as the ship remained a secret. However, their efforts were thwarted as more and more people continued to come despite the warnings. The officers had to gather additional reinforcements to keep the beach safe and prevent the public from getting too close. They had to use additional tactics like closing off the roads leading to the beach to try and stop the flow of incoming visitors. But it seemed to the cops like the more they try to tell people to stop coming, they keep coming all the more. Some of the hardier individuals even tried scaling the cliffs, only to find themselves cut off when the police created a perimeter around the ship. No amount of persuasion seemed to deter a few of the more daring explorers, as they continued to try and sneak past the police or find secret routes to the beach. Eventually, the police had to increase the number of officers and impose a strict no-entry policy in order to keep these troublemakers away. Tourists had already started climbing the ship, and a couple was even already walking around on it. The officer not flying the chopper quickly grabbed a megaphone and started shouting down that everybody needed to get the hell out of there. Otherwise, they would get arrested. But some people paid no attention to this warning, and some were even seen making their way to the ship, attempting to board it. Many people in the crowd were laughing at the cops, seeing the predicament they were in. Despite the warnings, some people were taking risks and climbing on board to explore the deserted ship, clearly not caring about the dangers of this decision. People continued to grumble and complain as the cops tightened their grip around the perimeter. Many of those present were disgruntled with the new restrictions, but the cops had no choice but to remain firm. They had to set limits for safety reasons until they could determine what the ship on their beach was all about. And that warning seemed to work wonders. People quickly started to retreat from the beach, and people who were climbing or exploring the ship jumped into the sea and headed to shore. But from there, the officers could not verify that everybody had listened to them. Some people still did not follow proper instructions. The officers had to be persistent and keep making sure all of the people left the area. Those who didn't listen were risking a possible arrest. It is important for the police to continue to be vigilant in maintaining both peace and order for the safety of all, as well as allowing them to carry out their duties. Some citizens may choose to ignore police instructions, so the officers must take appropriate measures to ensure compliance. This could include issuing a warning with potential consequences, such as an arrest if the warnings are not heeded. They may also need to call in additional units to prevent further non-compliance. More importantly, the police must ensure that all citizens have a safe place to go if they do retreat from the beach. When most people had cleared out of the beach, the chopper started its descent. Most people were, however, still lined up on the edge of the sand as they could not contain their curiosity, and the chopper coming down blasted a wave of sand in their faces that probably none of them saw coming. But still, they were not deterred. It was almost like a scene from a movie. The crowd could not help but gasp in awe at the sight unfolding before them. As the cops stepped on board the ship, the crowd watched in amazement. It felt as if what they were witnessing was something out of a movie, and everyone was eager to find out what the cops were looking for. Whispers began to spread through the crowd as everyone began to speculate. Some thought maybe the ship was a smuggling vessel, while others thought maybe they found some suspicious items on board. Whatever the reason, the crowd was excited to find out the answer. Fearing that these overly eager tourists would still try and find a way to get to the ship, the two officers started setting off the perimeter and closely guarded it until their colleagues could finally make their way to the beach by car. This took at least another hour. Once the police officers made it to the site, they made sure that nobody else would be able to get past the security line and that only authorized police officers would have access to the ship for investigation. They instructed all bystanders to keep their distance and additionally put up barriers around the perimeter to keep the curious onlookers away from the scene. The chief of police even canceled all other boat traffic in the area to ensure the safety of the investigation and hinder any chances of interference in the case. The police also took measures to scrape the beach for any evidence that could have been lost or overlooked by the on-site crew earlier. With more officers now finally on the scene, they could discuss a little about what the hell was happening here. There were no recognizable markings on the boat to identify it by. All they could say for sure was that this thing was old, very old, but it still looked surprisingly well. The officers gathered there pointed out the rusty hull, but also remarked on how well kept the boat appeared to be. How had this trawler survived for so long in such pristine condition? It was almost like some sort of time capsule or a remnant of a bygone era. Was it from East Germany, or maybe a distant relative of a previous fishing trip? The puzzle of the old boat was just beginning, and none of the officers wanted to make the first move. So they stood around in silence, just marveling at this strange sight before them. It was a unique and extraordinary thing, and yet the cops couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement. The paint chips had faded, replaced by sections of rust, and the carpets were waterlogged and cracked. The walls were creaky and the glass windows and doors were cracked from exposure. But it was clear that wherever this old boat had been for the past decades, it had not been underwater. That would have caused a whole another sort of decay. That conclusion would cause a surprising amount of confusion as the police learned more about the history of this ship. Despite the condition of the ship, it remained afloat, and there were even poles and sails that had not been torn or destroyed. The cops realized that this was far from an ordinary day at work. The ship was a true time capsule in the middle of the ocean, revealing a part of history that had been forgotten. The ship was a mystery that begged to be solved. They had to uncover answers to why the ship had been abandoned and what had happened to it in the past few decades. They set out to determine the true identity of the vessel and its tragedy. The pressure exerted on a sunken ship would be much more intense than that of a ship drifting. The metals would age much quicker, and the salt water corroding the shell of the vessel would be an instantaneous effect. Over time, a sunken ship would be completely broken down as organisms consumed the structure for food and resources. Scuba divers and scavengers would also undoubtedly have marked the ship for their own interests, often prying away material to take as souvenirs. Parts of the ship, such as the doors, lifeboats, and portholes, could be missing entirely. Unless myth and legends existed as to the whereabouts of the sunken ship, Its location could be nearly impossible to determine. Lastly, there would be evidence of previous attempts of salvage, such as tools, equipment, and hazardous materials, leading to additional hazards at the location of the ship. By the looks of it, this ship had been used to transport passengers, and this was immediately a great help in helping them discover where it came from. There were only a select group of companies that ever had passenger ships of this size, and decades ago, there were even fewer of them. The police managed to track down registration numbers and other identifying features from past records and look into the activities of any known companies that may have owned the vessel. They examined various sources of photographic evidence to gain an understanding of where it traveled and who was on board. By looking into potential duplicate ships in existence, they were also able to track down the whereabouts of the original ship more easily. They also verified port of origin information that was found on the manifest and inspected maintenance records to establish dates of manufacture and determine who took ownership of the vessel. So while a couple of the officers made their way towards the ship to go and check it out, one started behind to make a couple of calls in an attempt to figure out what kind of ship this was. Research and resource people are an invaluable asset to police investigations, as they can help to put pieces of the puzzle together. They can gather information from multiple sources, often leading to a better understanding of the situation. Human resources can help to locate people and items that could assist in furthering the investigation. For example, they might contact organizations or experts that can provide valuable insight into the behavior and movements of a particular suspect. Research people can also work together with the police to employ technology and other resources to help find information or evidence that could help solve the case. And it would not be long until he got presented with some very surprising answers. Apparently, the officers were correct in their assessment that this was an old passenger ship. But according to the person who knew it, it should have been at the bottom of the sea, mile and mile away from here, because this ship had sunken 90 years ago in the infamous Bermuda Triangle. The police officers were instantly stunned, as they had heard countless stories of ships and crews getting lost in the mysterious Bermuda Triangle, never to return. This ship appearing without any crew or explanation added another level of mystery to the situation. The officers quickly realized that the only way to solve this puzzle was to launch a full investigation, both of the ship itself as well as the potential culprits responsible for its sudden reappearance. The closer they got to finding the answer, the more strange pieces of the puzzle seemed to appear and eventually blur together into a complicated and terrifying mystery. The Bermuda Triangle, also known as the Devil's Triangle, is an area located in the northwestern Atlantic Ocean, situated between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. This infamous region is notorious for an alarmingly high number of unexplained disappearances and paranormal phenomena, which have been attributed to supernatural occurrences. The area's legend began in the early 1950s, when reports emerged of ships and planes inexplicably vanishing within or near the triangle, with no survivors or remains ever found. Over the years, a variety of theories have been put forth in an attempt to explain the Bermuda Triangle's strange happenings. Some claim the disappearances are caused by powerful ocean currents, while others believe aliens are involved. Many others doubt the validity of these theories and attribute the disappearances and phenomena to natural disasters such as hurricanes, earthquakes, and rogue waves. But whatever the cause may be, the Bermuda Triangle continues to fascinate and capture the attention of people all around the world. The mystery surrounding the Bermuda Triangle only adds to its allure, as it has intrigued people for years and sparked the imaginations of those who ponder its secrets. It has inspired movies, books, and documentaries, offering a constant source of entertainment. In some ways, this mysterious triangular region of the Atlantic serves as an example of how people are fascinated by the unknown, reminding us of the world's magnificence and power. Stories around the phenomenon of the Bermuda Triangle and its secrets have been passed down through generations, adding to its legend and mystery. Numerous vessels and aircraft have disappeared from its dangerous waters without a trace, and many theories have been put forward to explain the disappearances. It has been rumored to host everything from pathways to different realms to extraterrestrial activity. Some have even speculated that the area is home to an advanced civilization that exists beneath the sea's surface. This has been one of the most iconic and mysterious stories about the Bermuda Triangle. On December 5, 1945, a group of 5 U.S. Navy torpedo bombers, known as Flight 19, set out for a training mission, but mysteriously disappeared without a trace. The planes were led by Lieutenant Charles Taylor, and the other members of the crew were Lieutenant Robert Cook, Ensign George Jones, Ensign Earl Koenig, and 4 other enlisted men. Neither the planes nor any remains of the crew were ever found. Conspiracy theories suggest the planes may have encountered some kind of supernatural event which caused them to vanish, but no definitive explanation has been given. Theories about what happened to Flight 19 have ranged from freak weather conditions that caused a mysterious spatial displacement, to alien abduction, to a rift in the fabric of time created by the area's powerful electromagnetic forces. Some speculation has included a possible entry into another dimension, a sudden and powerful magnetic force capable of destroying the aircraft, and even a secret military experiment gone wrong. More recently, some have postulated that the planes were attacked by a UFO, or perhaps had been intercepted by a rogue military operation. Whatever the true cause of the occurrences, the legend of Flight 19 remains one of the most enduring mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle. In January of 1948, a luxurious British South American Airways Avro Tudor 4 passenger airliner, known as Star Tiger, disappeared mysteriously en route to Bermuda. The plane was carrying 25 passengers and crew and was reported to have vanished somewhere within the curve of the so-called Devil's Triangle. Theories regarding the disappearance include a possible instrument malfunction which caused the plane to fly off course and crash. It was also suggested that there might have been a mid-air explosion, or the sudden appearance of a powerful electromagnetic field which disabled the craft's navigational systems. Other theories suggest the plane could have been victim to some unknown force or anomaly, such as an incorrect latitude reading or a violent storm. Despite exhaustive searches over the years, Star Tiger has never been found, and the cause of the disappearance remains one of the greatest mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle. In March of 1918, the USS Cyclops, a 542-foot-long cargo ship with a crew of 306, disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle while on a journey from the Caribbean to Baltimore, Maryland. The ship had loaded up on fuel from Barbados and sent out an SOS signal on March 3rd before falling off the radar. One of the mysteries surrounding the disappearance is the fact that the ship had made successful trips through the area in the past without any reported incidents. Theories of what happened to the ship range from catastrophic engine or propeller failure during a storm and the ship being caught in a powerful whirlpool, to a stealth attack from a U-boat or a vessel from the German fleet. Despite a thorough search, the wreckage of the USS Cyclops has never been found, leaving behind one of the biggest mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle. The officer looked at the ship again and even sent a picture to the expert that had revealed this bizarre information to him. This did not look like a ship that had been on the sea floor for 90 years. The expert could do nothing else but agree, but he knew what he knew and had no other explanation. The officer was left more confused than he had ever been. It was impossible that a 90-year-old ship could have been in such good condition. What made it even more confounding was that he hadn't found a single person on board. Who had been steering it during all these years? The officer felt certain that someone was behind this mystery, and he was determined to find out who. He vigorously began to investigate the strange case, but the answers seemed to be eluding him. He couldn't understand why no one else had seen the ship before and how it could have stayed on the sea floor without anyone knowing about it. these questions only further deepened the mystery that was this ship. The officer was in shock, yet determined to find out the truth. The officer on the shore could only hope that his colleagues who went to inspect the boat had more luck in finding out the truth about the strange ship. He had pretty much gotten on a dead end here. But the information he had received would definitely prove useful in the end. Police investigations are not always an easy job, and the puzzle pieces don't necessarily fit together all at once. Sometimes a case takes a while to crack, and the true course of events are hard to unravel. It takes a lot of patience and dedication to see it through. The officer could only keep in mind that some cases remain forever unsolved, while some cases take weeks, months, years, and even decades to put together. It is a job that requires dedication and relentless effort until the answers are found. By this point, the other officers had managed to make their way to the ship and started to climb on the side of it. From the outside, it just looked like a standard shipwreck that had been collecting rust for decades in a place where everybody had forgotten about it. But surprisingly, once they took a closer look, the officers could see that all of the external components were still intact and weathered, but otherwise in surprisingly good condition. It was like some sort of miracle that this old ship had avoided the corrosive effects of its environment, and the cops couldn't help but feel relieved that the situation wasn't as dire as they had initially anticipated. Even after all of these years, the ship still seemed to be surprisingly sound. The windows and doors were noticeably corroded, but still somehow held firm, and the engines and propellers were still attached in all their glory, although it was obvious that the ship hadn't been running for years. All of the crew quarters were surprisingly spacious and well preserved. But when they tried to explore more, they quickly noticed that there was something strange going on the ship. They could easily walk around on all the upper floors, but seemingly all the entrances to the lower deck were closed off. The police officers were mindful of the fact that someone or something else could be aboard the ship, aside from them. As a result, they increased their vigilance and kept their eyes peeled to the environment around them. And not just with old rusty doors. It is essential for police officers to be aware of their surroundings and mindful of potential threats while conducting investigations. Searching the ship involved carefully planning their steps and identifying the best methods for apprehending any person or thing hiding there. They had to be alert in case of any attempts to escape while they were down below. It was important for the police officers to thoroughly assess the ship to make sure they did not miss any details. As a precautionary measure, they also posted officers around the ship to ensure that any intruders would be apprehended. Most of the doors to the lower deck looked in a lot better condition than the rest of the ship, and they were sealed off extremely well. There was seemingly no way that the officers could get in. They wondered if the doors were sealed off with someone inside to keep them safe, or if it was to keep out whatever resided inside from getting out. After a few moments of debating, the officers decided to prepare for the worst, that whatever resided inside was far, far worse than they could handle. But they did get the feeling that there was already something inside of there. The officers began to question what they were up against. They weren't sure if the locks were put in place to protect anyone within, or if instead they were keeping the threat inside at bay. If there was a threat within, how powerful was it? Was it more powerful than the resources they had at their disposal? Could the unknown be even more threatening than the outside world? The officers drew their weapons and stood guard, alert to any sudden movement. As they stood there, tension building, they wondered if they'd regret entering the vessel, or if the unrest inside was nothing that they couldn't handle. Their imaginations ran wild as they considered the possibilities. The officers debated a plan of attack, trying to gauge the safest way to breach the secured rooms. Voices remained hushed, as though in fear of disturbing whatever resided within. They wondered if the locks were meant for protection, both for anyone within and the officers outside. The officers slowly started to inch closer to the door until one of them stepped forward and knocked. They waited for an answer in silence, the only sound being the eerie creak of the ship. When no answer was forthcoming, their immediate worry was that the threat inside was far, far worse than what they faced outside, and a further sense of trepidation set in. When they eventually managed to make their way in, they learned that the boat had actually been transformed into a very nice home. The officers were surprised to find that the small boat had been completely refurbished to appear like a normal house. The walls were freshly painted with neutral-toned colors, and modern furniture was arranged in an orderly fashion. The officers exclaimed and marveled at the sight before them. It was definitely a functional living space, complete with comfortable bedding, footstools, and a cozy armchair placed by a window that overlooked the sea. There was even a separate dining room, furnished with an antique-style table and chairs. As it turned out, the ship had never sunken in the first palace, and the captain had just hidden the boat on a small island where he wanted to start living. The reason it had ended up here was that the boat had gotten dislodged at the island and had floated along with the current to this beach.